Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David L. Holmes, and today I will be doing my organizational change presentation on the impact of urban development on African American communities, which is a neurological and environmental perspective. All right, so first I'll go over the relationship between urban development and neurological health. So I'm basically hypothesizing that exclusionary urban development affects African American communities. In particular, it affects their behavioral and health. Some key terms to focus on are conscious behavior, environment, urban development, and neurology. So our nervous system basically tells us what environment we're in. Whether we know it or not, our bodies always pick up signals. It can tell us if we're in a high stress environment. It can tell us if we're in a cool environment. So our nervous systems can actually sense things before we know about them. In our nervous systems, we have what they call synaptic clefts. So, of course, we know our nervous system sends signals to our brains, but they also send signals to different parts of our bodies. And in those synaptic clefts, we have what they call neurotransmitters. Now, neurotransmitters tell our bodies and us exactly what to do. Neurotransmitters can also influence our behaviors. We can also call some of these neurotransmitters hormones, which are released through our endocrine system. Hormones and neurotransmitters can influence our behaviors in a many of ways. So we release three chemicals when we under stress, which are cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. And all of these things can range depending on your environment. So again, remember that your nervous system can tell us exactly what we're in, no matter if that's a stressful environment, calm or peaceful. And then also, it releases neurotransmitters and hormones, and those influence our behaviors. So with this being said, I hypothesize that traditional environments, or what I call societal conformity environments or non-exclusive environments, they impact our hormones and behaviors, leading to societal conformity. Another way I'd like to define societal conformity is conforming to whatever is the culture in your community. So if you live in a high stress area that's high crime, low education, there's a lot of violence, there can be fighting, there's a high release of cortisol there. So this environment that you live in can be causing you to conform to it or adapt to those behaviors because you get those same type of chemical releases. So urban development influences is the main thing that I want to focus on. And I like to use a lot of examples, but one in particular, I use Pruitt Eagle Housing, which was in St. Louis, Missouri in the 1950s. So this was a housing development and it was on the west side, the northwest side of St. Louis. And it was supposed to be close to downtown. It was supposed to provide housing, but it didn't consider the people that had to live there. So usually people that live in these developments in these project houses, they face a lot of conditions. It's a lot of overcrowding. It's a lot of lead paint poisoning and lead water poisoning, which can lead to endocrine disruptors that disrupt many of our neurotransmitters, such as our reproductive hormones and neurotransmitters, and that can be estrogen, that can be testosterone, and then also your body can overreact and be overstimulated due to some of these chemicals and hormones trying to regulate themselves. So a few other examples that I like to show people is New York. A lot of times when people go to New York, they don't realize why they're on edge or why they feel so antsy or anxious or overwhelmed. And this it can actually be because of the environment that they're in. A lot of cars, especially if you're from like a southern state. So your nervous system picks up that immediately, and that's why you go that's why you go to respond how you respond in these environments and spaces. The theory that I like to use are actually two. I usually like to use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I feel like that's the general theory, but in particular with this topic, I want to focus on optimal arousal theory, and I also want to focus on environmental stress theory. So, environmental stress theory is basically letting us know that the factors in our environments, they influence us, they impact our stress levels, they impact our dopamine levels, all of these things. And optimal arousal theory basically states that we seek arousal dependent on the level of boredom that we have, or we might tend to run away from these arousal moments when basically there are too many things in place. So basically, what they're saying is we want to find some type of balance when it comes to the optimal arousal theory, and then we also want to make sure that we're in a safe environment and we're not in an environmentally stressful place. Historical contexts are issues such as redlining. Redlining was a practice in urban development when banks held specific funding from African Americans. So by them having redlining issues, this allowed this didn't allow black people and African Americans to actually develop the type of real estate that they wanted because they couldn't get the funding. So you have a bunch of private investors that partnered with the government in the 1930s and 1940s to build some of our first project housing. Techwood Homes in Atlanta, Georgia was actually the first project housing in the United States. But these places often exclude black people's and African Americans, minorities, people's ideas. It excludes their thoughts and it actually excludes their voices. So we want to make sure that now in today's time that we get to advocate to get past these things, which is why an intervention strategy that I thought of was a community benefits agreement. A community benefits agreement basically has the community stakeholders and residents partnering with real estate developers, private real estate developers to actually sit down and come up with a plan that the community can actually benefit from. And this also gives a chance for both parties to listen to each other. Real estate developers can know exactly what people in this community need. And we all know the importance of doing problem analysis and needs assessments from previous classes. But when you're developing places for people, you have to get their input. And a lot of this urban development has been exclusionary and it has caused a lot of environmental factors and it has caused a lot of social conformity. Other places that policy interventions can take place or ordinances are zoning meetings, which is what you see on the far right. So in this space, this is usually when a development piece is already active, but a community benefits agreement is something that can take place before a project is already launched and we just hear the public comments and probably just wait the process of these things getting completed. So this concludes my presentation. I hope this was very informative to you. These are a few references, and I just want to leave you guys with a message. Be involved in your communities, be involved in developing, organizing, and planning, and you guys can start to make the changes that you wish to see in your communities and have a positive effect on your body, neurotransmitters, and hormones. I'm David L. Holmes, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.